All right, guys, welcome into the Auburn Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Tom Green, who is joining us live from the Plains. Tom, we are less than 2 hours away from kickoff. Auburn hosts Missouri, week 4 of the college football season. Kickoff at 11 o'clock at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Just a moment ago, we heard the band come through as Tiger Walk is there going on in the Plains. How are things looking? How's the weather out there?
It's a perfect day. I mean, woke up this morning, it was like 60-ish degrees. I think around kickoff it'll be in the low 70s. Not a cloud in the sky, just perfect football weather today.
Good stuff, Tom. So, guys, kickoff at 11 o'clock. Auburn hosts Missouri. A lot of talk this week about this game, about Auburn beginning SEC play as conference play is underway. Right now, the Tigers about a touchdown favorite, maybe a little more going into this game. Tom, first of all, just your general thoughts looking at this matchup and what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, this should be a game that Auburn wins. I know Auburn has had its fair struggles this year, kind of uneven in those first two games against Mercer and San Jose State, and obviously got absolutely walloped last week against Penn State.
Yep.
But Missouri has not looked particularly good itself this year. I mean, its two wins are against Louisiana Tech and then an FCS program in Abilene Christian, and they got blown out by a similar score that Auburn lost to Penn State, to Kansas State. And, Kansas State was able to just run all over Missouri in that game. I think they had like 240 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns, 5.5 yards a carry. So, I think Auburn has a distinct advantage in that area, even though, there's a lot of things going against Auburn going into this game, especially when you look at that quarterback position.
Yeah, and let's talk about that quarterback position, one of the hottest topics right now in the SEC, but especially at Auburn. Right now, as far as we know, TJ Finley is hurt. Let's start there. I know we have some stats on him from what he has done already this season. In moments, he has been great. In other moments, he has been questionable at best. Tom, what is the outlook for Finley when it comes to not only this game, but moving forward as well?
Yeah, well, he's going to miss today's game. He injured his right shoulder, I think on like the third to last play of the first half against Penn State. It was on a second down run where he picked up 13 yards and kind of dragged a couple of defenders to get some extra yardage there, and just kind of got banged up on that play. His left shoulder was already hurt going into that game, but he was able to kind of manage that pain and play through it. But his right shoulder, Sunday morning, we heard that he had trouble putting on his shirt, had to eat with his left hand when his parents were in town. So he has been ruled out for this game, and they're unsure if he's going to be, able to go next week or going into the Georgia game. I think it's kind of a week-to-week situation with him right here. They're still trying to figure out, kind of the extent of that shoulder injury, make sure there's no structural damage there, but really just better to kind of err on the side of caution with him.
No doubt about that. So the expectation, I assume, although as far as we know, I don't think there's a starter but named Robbie Ashford to get the start today. What do you expect out of Ashford? Here are his numbers so far this season. Again, this is a guy who is a huge threat on the ground, has made some plays with his feet for sure.
Yeah, I think this is going to be Robbie Ashford's show today. I think we may see freshman Holden Gardner in there for the first time in some certain situations, but I don't think this is going to be, kind of a 50-50 split or a rotation like we've seen the first 3 weeks when Robbie and TJ have been healthy. I think they're going to kind of rely on Robbie, make it, his opportunity to run this offense and, just kind of see how it goes from there.
So looking down the depth chart, Zach Calzada, the news this week, Tom, is that he will have season-ending surgery. We have not seen him play any plays at all on the field for Auburn this season. What does that mean for the depth chart, and what does that mean for Calzada moving forward?
Well, in terms of the depth chart, right now Auburn is down to just 2 scholarship quarterbacks, which is, kind of wild to consider, when they entered spring with 5 guys and just a completely revamped quarterback room after Bo Nix transferred. And obviously, a week in the spring, Demetrius Davis transferred and wound up at Alabama State. And now you got your starter injured. You have the guy who was kind of the perceived favorite going into the offseason out for the year now without ever taking a snap here. And, this injury, it stems back to last year's game against Auburn with Texas A&M. That's when Zach Calzada hurt his left shoulder. It's what kind of limited him throughout spring practice. He was clear to return in the summer, but had a couple of setbacks there. And, this surgery was something that he was going to need regardless eventually. But I think after, those first 2 games not getting in there and then, them not turning to him in that Penn State game, he kind of felt it was in his best interest to, just get that cleaned up and get good to go for spring practice.
No doubt about that. Going into the season, all we did was talk about how this quarterback room was so talented and how Brian Carson was going to have all these options, and it feels like things have really fallen off. Thank you for your comment. Kelvin Battle says we'd rather do just fine. Let's run the ball, give it to Tank and Hunter more. We're going to get more on the run game in just a moment. You're just tuning in. It's the Auburn pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Week 4 already of the college football season. Auburn 2-1 on the year after losing to Penn State last week. Tom is joining us from the Plains. Tom, a great atmosphere, hopefully expected there on the Plains for Auburn fans today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it'll, it's an early kickoff and they're coming off of a bad loss. So I think, some fans might be late arriving or, kind of not wanting to be around. But, I think for the most part, this is going to be a pretty packed stadium, especially the student section always shows up here, regardless, rain or shine. 11 a.m. or 6 p.m. They're going to be here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few little specklings of empty seats or something like that. But in general, Auburn's fan base, they're a loyal fan base. They're going to be here through thick and thin for this team until till the end there. So I expect a pretty good atmosphere here, especially it's going to be Missouri's first time ever playing at Auburn. Which is kind of crazy considering they've been in the league for 11 years now, I guess it is. And they've only, played twice before, and one of those times was in the SEC Championship in 2013. So I'm expecting a pretty good atmosphere here today.
Let's jump right back into that quarterback conversation. We're talking about Holden Gardner before the show started. The freshman kind of all-star guy, all the accolades coming over from Georgia. What is the expectation of what he can bring to either today's game or down the road this season, Tom, for Brian Harsin?
Well, you got to consider, if we see him today, it'll be the first time that he's on the field. So I don't think they're going to throw too much at him or ask him to do too much. But we've heard a whole lot about just how nice of a ball that this kid throws. I mean, Brian Harsin even said it back in the preseason. They were out there practicing, all of a sudden Holden Gardner's throwing a better ball than anybody else, and probably the best ball that he's seen out of any of the quarterbacks that he's had through his career. So obviously there's talent there. Brian Harsin's been very high on this kid. He was one of the first players to commit to Brian Harsin when he took over at Auburn. A full year before signing, and when he got here, Harsin was talking about how this kid has only gotten better over the course of the last year. So they have high expectations for him in the future. I'm sure that they were kind of banking on not having to play him this year, or at the very least, kind of get him some spot work and maybe some blowout games, and just get his toes in the water and use those 4 games that are afforded, so you can still redshirt. But he might get called on here earlier, get thrown in the fire earlier than expected. And I think certainly if Robbie Ashford struggles today, they're going to need to see what they have from Holden Gardner with TJ Finley questionable for the next couple of weeks, and Zach Calzada out for the year.
No doubt, guys, if you're just tuning into Auburn pregame show, and what more could you get here? If you can't make it to the game, it pretty much feels like you're at the game right now. Obviously, the band right behind Tom there, bringing us the game day atmosphere. We're talking the Auburn offense and what they've done to this point. Let's talk about the pressure on Brian Harsin, Tom. Can a guy like Robbie Ashford, can a guy like Holden Gardner come into this game, spark some excitement, maybe win a ball game, and get a little bit of pressure off of Brian Harsin today and maybe moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, this is a game that Auburn feels like it has to win. And, Brian Harsin was asked if he felt like this was a must-win game earlier this week. And, he kind of joked that, every game's a must-win game. You're not going in there looking to lose any game or consider any losses okay losses. But, you just kind of look at the situation that Auburn's in coming this game, coming off of its worst home loss in a decade. Anytime you kind of invoke that 2012 team, it's not good, especially for a coach who was already under a lot of pressure entering the year. And then you look at Auburn's SEC schedule, Missouri should be the most winnable game on that schedule. Missouri's kind of in a similar situation to Auburn where, just not entering the season with super high expectations. I think the loser of this game between, Brian Harsin and Eli Drinker will have a below 500 record at their school. That's obviously not a position you want to be in, especially for Auburn when you look at the schedule that's coming ahead. LSU next week, then you hit the road at Georgia, at Ole Miss before the bye week. It doesn't get easier from here. So, you're going to need a bounce back game to alleviate some of that pressure.
No doubt about that. Scott Odom tuning in as he always does every week says if Parson loses today, the pressure to fire him just grows. I agree. Tom, y'all did a story this week about the coaching ties between Auburn and Missouri. Eli Drinker was supposed to work under Harsin. Let's talk about that dynamic. And obviously, at the end of the day, this is football. Both these guys are kind of coaching for their jobs. They're not trying to do anybody any favors. But it is kind of interesting to look at the dynamic. College football is kind of a small world.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it'll be on display more so than usual today. You kind of touched on it there. Eli Drinkwitz worked with Brian Harsin first at Arkansas State and then at Boise State. And it kind of goes back to actually Eli's days working with Gus Malzahn. Eli Drinkwitz was a high school coach in Springdale, Arkansas, and was offered a quality control job in 2010 when Gus Malzahn was the offensive coordinator here. And he was basically Gus's, coffee intern, helping around with some other stuff and some game planning stuff like that. But he left a stable financial situation to take a job that paid about $15,000 a year to get his foot in the door at the college level. He joked this week, he thought college football was easy because his first year they won a national title and had the best quarterback on the planet. Then Eli was on Gus's staff at Arkansas State in 2012. Had an opportunity to come back to Auburn with Gus in 2013, but in an off-field role as an analyst. Shortly after Brian Harsin got that job at Arkansas State, replacing Gus Malzahn, Eli kind of knocked on his door and expressed his interest in, remaining on staff, interviewed for the job, and Brian Harsin kept him on as running backs coach and co-offensive coordinator. And then when he went to Boise State a year later, took him there. There's certainly a few other ties on that staff to Auburn and to Brian Harsin. Blake Baker worked with Brian Harsin in the past at Texas, I believe, with Manny Diaz there. Bush Hamden's another name. It's just several ties all over the place. I know Missouri's got a couple other coaches that previously worked at Auburn themselves. So certainly a very intertwined coaching tree on the field here this weekend.
Tom Green is like our Kirk Herbstreit on the show. He has all the information, he knows all the background, especially when it comes to Auburn, but a lot all around college football if y'all haven't gathered that yet. Tom, when you look at what has been a bright spot for Auburn, if there has one, the running game, very solid moments. And a lot of people in the comments are saying, let's put Tank in, run the ball more often. There have been criticism towards Brian Harsin about not running it enough. Obviously, everyone's a coach. It's easy to be 5,000 feet away and to say, hey, X, Y, and Z, or to look at your TV screen and have an opinion. But there is no question that when Auburn has been at its best, it can run the ball.
Yeah, you have one of the best running backs in the country in Tank Bigsby. I believe, Pro Football Focus has him graded as like the second or third best running back through 3 weeks. He breaks tackles at a very high rate, which is, something that kind of fell off last season, but he did very good as a freshman. So he's been more explosive this year. And then you kind of look at last week and they just went away from him. He had 5 touches in the first quarter, did not have a carry in the second quarter, and then had a few in the third quarter before things just got away from Auburn. They basically just abandoned the run altogether, aside from Robbie Ashford scrambling. And, you kind of question that, especially in the first half of a one-possession game when your best player is not being fed the ball. So I would expect us to see a healthy dose of Tank Bigsby today, especially given Auburn's quarterback situation. I know the run game has been a little bit more successful, and Robbie Ashford's in there just because of the dynamic he brings has kind of opened up some lanes for the running backs themselves. So honestly, Auburn's best chance to win this game is going to be leaning a little bit more heavily on Tank, which is, what we kind of thought that we would see from them more throughout this season. They spent all offseason talking about how they wanted Tank Bigsby to be the foundation upon which this offense is built. We just, haven't exactly seen that totally through the first 3 weeks. I know he had a great opener, made some plays in that second game too. But, last week, I think Auburn should hope that, that is an anomaly in terms of just his usage and his production.
No doubt about that. And when you need it most, SEC play is certainly that when it comes to the run game. I want to touch briefly. Scott asked, you talk about Tank's gifts to the team to get them fired up. We saw the video posted by the team this week, Tank giving the guys beats by Dre. Obviously, this is just one example of how NIL has been a positive for student athletes, not only here in the state of Alabama, but all throughout college athletics. Pretty cool moment there, Tom, I thought.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, he gifted the entire team walk-on scholarship players. Yeah, I went and looked it up afterward. Auburn's roster has 114 players listed on that. You take away Tank Bigsby, that's 113. Those Beats Studio 3 wireless headphones are $350 a pop.
Wow.
That is a gift of about $40,000 that he gave his teammates, and that's all made possible through NIL, which is really cool. I know his teammates were super psyched about it.
Yeah,
we got a really cool Colby Wooden reaction. He's always up for a good reaction shot or a nice line. Yeah. I think Tate Johnson called him Santa Claus, said Christmas came early this year. So I think that was a really cool moment, and for it to come from one of the guys who is obviously one of the more talented players on his team, but isn't necessarily the most vocal guy. I think that means a lot from them.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a walk-on, hadn't probably seen the field all season, and I got beats by Dre, I'd be like, that's like the Christmas of my entire season. I mean, right there, like I can just, I can be happy never seeing the field, but I get a free gift. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not even like just like any pair of Beats by Dre. I mean, I have the little clip-ons in here now, but he got them like the Cadillac of the Beats by Dre. I mean,
listen, journalist money ain't like the NIL money, bro. We're not about that. It certainly is not. We're not in it for the money, guys. Okay, let's talk about the Auburn defense quick before we let y'all go. We're about 90 minutes away from kickoff there on the Plains. Tom is joining us from Jordan-Hare Stadium. When we look at this Auburn defense against Penn State, I think we joked about in the pregame show, there's a lot of big numbers on this screen here, Tom.
Yeah, and that's certainly not what you want, especially when you came into the season believing that your defense was the strength of this team, especially that front seven. We've kind of noted the secondary's issues in the passing game through these first couple of weeks, but I think the big surprise was just how badly that rushing attack kind of gashed Auburn's defense. You look at those 5 rushing touchdowns, 245 rushing yards, especially in short yardage situations in the red zone. Auburn really just was not able to step up and deliver there. And that's a surprise because you look at the talent they have up there. Some of the most likely NFL prospects on this team, the Derek Halls, the Colby Woodens, guys like that. You're going to expect a better performance against the run, and they just did not have that last week, which was particularly surprising because coming into that game against Penn State, it kind of seemed like that was going to be Auburn's biggest advantage, and they just folded in that game. So they know that they didn't perform up to their standard. They know they need to bounce back, and I would expect to see a better performance, especially against the Missouri offensive line that has kind of been shaky itself. They've only given up a few sacks on the year, but I think they're giving up like 7 or 8 tackles for a loss in the run game and short passes. Some of that is just Missouri. It's been running a lot more sideline to sideline stuff than they probably should. But I would expect a good response from Auburn's front seven today.
Yeah. Tom, briefly looking ahead the road for Auburn, you touched on this earlier in the show. It does not get any easier. Talk about some losable games. There are some losable games that are right ahead for Auburn. Not only losable, but rivalry games. LSU at home, at number 1 Georgia on the road, and then a trip to Ole Miss, and then it's really the entire schedule. I mean, we talked about in the preseason, Auburn was going to have, if not the toughest schedule in college football, certainly one of them among the top 3. This is a must-win game from that regard for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, LSU is still, I think, kind of an enigma in that first year under Brian Kelly, but they showed last week, that they can play. That team is not lacking for talent. Brian Kelly is still a really good coach. I think they're still trying to search for their identity, and it's never going to be an easy game against LSU. And then you look at those first 2 road games of the season. I mean, it doesn't get much more difficult than that. At number 1 Georgia, the way they're playing, they're just a well-oiled machine. And then Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's offense, we know how good they can be, but defensively, Ole Miss has just been incredible this year too. So then you have that bye week to kind of recover, but you cannot go into that bye week at 2-5. You need to win this game. You need to kind of get that footing back, and that LSU game needs to be a winnable one for you too if you want to feel good heading into your first road games.
Yep. You're absolutely right. Tom Green, we appreciate your time. Really quick, looking around SEC and some games to keep an eye on. That 2:30 CBS kickoff game, Florida at Tennessee. The Volunteers dealing with some quarterback situation. What other games do you have your eye on in the conference?
I think you mentioned that Florida-Tennessee game I think is particularly intriguing.
Yeah.
Just always, I think, we're going to continue to see how far Billy Napier is able to bring that team, especially Anthony Richardson. He's got so much talent, but has had his own struggles. They haven't run him as much. They obviously haven't not been able to throw many touchdowns, and kind of just see like how legitimate Tennessee is at this point, because they've looked pretty good themselves.
No doubt about it. Top 25 matchup, Arkansas, Texas A&M. Alabama hosts Vanderbilt today. So conference play kicking off for a lot of folks, including Auburn. At home, week 4 of the college football season. The Tigers 2-1 right now, looking to improve to 3-1. Missouri playing at Jordan-Hare Stadium for the first time ever. Interesting fact. Tom, enjoy the game. We look forward to all of your great coverage post-game and your tweets during the game and everything coming from the Plains today.
Will do.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Auburn Pregame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Tom Green, I'm Simone Eli. We will see y'all for the postgame show. Enjoy game day, kickoff at 11.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.